excited for another night of exclusive drop? Who knows what the heck it means? Not me either, so it's okay. We'll figure it out together here. I'm just kidding. Today we are in our second and also final week of this series called Exclusive Drop, which is all about our identity in Christ. But before we get started into this talk, have you guys seen that trend that was really popular a little while ago to where people started making cakes that looked really, really realistic? Yeah, like some of these to where it literally looks like ribs and a Mountain Dew drink and everything like that. The point is, at first glance, none of us see, maybe we don't think that it looks like it, or maybe it does look a little bit like it because you're really good at guessing if it's cake or not. But nothing about the way that it looks makes you want to grab it and take a bite out of like the side of it, right? Because you don't think it's going to be sweet. But what makes those cakes so intriguing, because your eyes tell you one thing, but really it's something totally different. Like I saw this girl that makes cakes of people's animals, like their dogs, and I was like, wouldn't that be super weird that you were like cutting into a cake that's shaped just like your dog? I don't know how I feel about that. But guys, it's really funny because we can do this with food, sure, but the truth is we use what we see to draw conclusions about all sorts of different things. And what we're really talking about tonight is maybe more than anything else, we do this with people, right? So we use what we see to draw conclusions about all sorts of things, especially people. In fact, studies show that it takes just 7 seconds, only 7 seconds. Everybody hold up 7. Okay, good thing you all, okay, Wyatt, that is not 7. Thank you. I'm glad you all know what 7 is, except for Wyatt. And you can be sure that a large part of first impressions are what you see with your eyes, right? It's based off of how somebody looks, because 7 seconds, you don't really get much of impression other than looking at them, and maybe you get to hear what their voice is, right? It makes sense why we do this, because our brains really love categories. We like labels. The faster that we could put someone into a category or even a group, the less work our brains have to do. And let's be honest, guys, our brains are like us. They want to do the least amount of work possible, right? Who likes to do the least amount of work possible all the time? Me too. So guys, slapping a label on someone as soon as we can, it's not just only convenient, but it's less work for our brains, and our brains feel better when it happens, right? So it's a normal thing. Our brains just like automatically do that. And this is the way that people have always worked. It's how we've always done it. In fact, there's a story in the Old Testament of a Bible that talks about this very thing. So a guy named Samuel, does anybody know who Samuel is? Somewhat. You're going to learn who he is right now. Are you ready for this? So Samuel was a prophet for God. So God would speak to Samuel, and Samuel would speak for God to the people. And so at this point in time, the Hebrew people, so this is a really, really long time ago, like thousands of years ago. So at this point, God's people, the Israelite or the Hebrew people, they had just become their own sort of kingdom, and God wanted to be their king. So back in that time, it was all about kings and kingdoms and who was in charge of that realm or that territory and stuff. And so kings and kingdoms were really popular. But there was only one problem. See, the Hebrew people didn't want to look strange to the surrounding kingdoms. They wanted a human, flesh and blood king just like everybody else. And so a guy named Saul became their king, because God knew, okay, if you guys want a flesh and blood real person king, then I'm going to give you a real person king, and we'll see how this goes. So Saul became their king, and Saul was super great until he wasn't great. But it didn't take so long before the king thing started going to his head. I mean, could you imagine being king? I think I would take a little bit of power from being king to kind of do what I wanted to. So guys, he quit representing God and leading in the way that God intended. So God told Samuel that there was going to be a new king, and that Samuel would be the one to help choose who it was. He was going to go find him. So Samuel was this person that was going to help God find a new king for God's people in this new kingdom. So the other problem was that God had not been very specific about who this new king would be. He only told Samuel the kind of family that he was going to be from. So Samuel goes to that family. So this is Jesse's family. Can everybody say Jesse? All right. So Jesse, to find the next king. So here's what happens next. So let's go ahead and head a little bit into scripture. So it says, when they arrived, so when Samuel arrived, Samuel took one look at Eliab and thought, surely this is the Lord's anointed one. So in other words, Jesse's son Eliab looked exactly what Samuel thought a king would look like. So back in that time, it was all about the looks. You wanted to be strong, to be able to defend your kingdom. You wanted to be tall and big and probably, have nice hair. And so automatically, as soon as Samuel saw him, there was like, Eliab, you're the next king. But the author of Samuel says this next thing. So it says, but the Lord said to Samuel, don't judge by his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. People judge by what we see on the outside, but the Lord looks on the inside. So the story goes on. So one by one, Jesse brings out all of his sons, all assuming that they had to be the next king of Israel. And over again, God told Samuel, nope, wasn't that one either. And so the story really sums up what all of us has experienced at one point or another. What we see makes us draw a conclusion that ends up being totally wrong, right? Have you guys ever made a first impression to somebody or thought someone made a first impression on you and you ended up being totally wrong about it? We size someone up, or maybe someone sizes us up, and we make assumptions that are really off, all because of what we see or maybe even don't see, right? Samuel did it. Jesse did it. They missed what God could see in these moments. See, the problem is you and I do this all of the time. And so we make comparisons and we size others up. We think that what we see or what we believe is the standard and has to be right? Because we want to think that our brains are good at judging others, that we're good at seeing who characters are, because that's what we really want, right? We don't want to be wrong about who other people are. But guys, the truth is, God's judgment, God's standard is the only one that actually matters. And God doesn't make quick assumptions about people. And that's the thing. So when we look at ourselves, and maybe we look at somebody else, we might see a world of a difference. But what does God see? Friends, God sees God's image in us and God's image in them. So we see God's image is in us and God's image is in them too. So which leads us to an even bigger question. So let me explain this. So we might deny that we judge or look down on someone, but there's a test that we can do that reveals how good we actually are on our first impressions and how we're judging people, how we really, really see somebody. So I'm going to ask you guys a couple of questions, and these are just self-reflection questions that you're going to be thinking of. So can you really gas somebody up that you don't get along with? So can you hype somebody up that you don't get along with? Think about that. I know, I tried to be cool and then it didn't hit well for me. Can you in all sincerity find somebody to truly hype up, truly make them feel good about themselves and celebrate about someone that you consider maybe different than you? Can you see the image in God in those that you just don't like? Maybe those who annoy you. Because people are really annoying, right? Can you see the image of God in them? What about people with different physical or mental abilities or capacities? Maybe people that don't learn as quick. Maybe people that aren't as good in social situations. Maybe people that don't look like us or have some type of physical disability. How do you see the image of God in them? Are you even thinking of that? Friends, that's where things gets a little bit more complicated, right? Because it's hard to accept someone that devalues others. Maybe it's hard to accept that they have value themselves, right? Someone that devalues others has value themselves. How do you handle knowing that everyone is made in the image of God includes those who have done incredible harm to others? Maybe incredible harm to you. who have made you angry, or maybe just really, really frustrate you or annoy you and you cannot stand being around them. Because I know that we all know that there is a couple of people, we're not going to like everybody, right? Guys, the thing is, we can make a judgment about someone and be way off. But the other side of it is that we can make a judgment about someone and totally nail it, right? We just know right off the bat who they are. That person or that group that has gotten it wrong, has done something they shouldn't, has rightfully earned the label that they have, right? Because they are just mean. They are just rude. I'm not excusing in any way what they did was right. But then, even then, friends, God sees something in them that we can't always, right? What does God see? God sees that person as beautiful creation and a person who is gifted in the image of God. Let's be honest, that could be really hard for us to accept, right? Especially those who have hurt us or hurt other people that we love. There's a passage from the book of Psalms, a book that is considered kind of like poetry or songs that is found what we call in the Old Testament, that has the same kind of idea. So this psalm was written by King David, which, by the way, is the person that Samuel ended up choosing, and God saying that was the person. He was the youngest one, the scrawniest, the person that nobody looked upon to be able to do anything. He was the one that God chose because he looked on the inside and saw David's heart and was like, that's the one that I want. So this is coming from the guy that thought that he wasn't going to be anything and ended up being king. So he writes this. So why don't we do this, guys? Why don't you guys all close your eyes and imagine what I'm about to read to you. So everybody go ahead and close your eyes. I see a lot of open eyes here. So this is David talking to God and reflecting on this. So he says, you made all of the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of sand. And when I wake up, you are still with me. So you guys can open your eyes. So the thing is, that is something that we oftentimes, a scripture that we oftentimes use to talk about our image, the image of God that is in us, to the value that we have God, to the value that we have to God. And friends, it's really tempting to read that and relate to what David is saying, because the same is true for us. Friends, God made us. God is with us in every single moment. We are God's complex workmanship, and God sees us as precious and valuable. All of those things are very true. But here's the thing. Those things aren't just truths that David wrote about himself to make us feel good about ourselves. Those things are true for everybody, even the people we might not want it to be true for. God is with the person that we don't like. God created your not-so-favorite teacher. God sees your annoying little brother or your annoying little sister as precious and wonderful. In other words, knowing that you're valuable to God is never meant to make other people less valuable to you. And let me say that again, because that is one of the most important things, friends. Knowing your worth and who you are in God is never meant to make other people less than. Remember that. All people were created with beauty and life and wonder in mind. And that means God's image is in each and every single person that we meet. God is deeply involved and part of every single person's life. And we might look at someone and see a bad decision maker, an annoyance, a frustrating personality, but God sees someone who is made in his image. He looks upon that person, he says, you are good and I love you for who you are. Everyone is someone made uniquely in God's image, friends. So I think the next question we have to ask here is, what do we do with this? Because it is not an easy thing to get along with people that we don't like or have done harm to us or are annoying, right? How do we begin to see others like there may be more to them than we might first see or first make an impression of? How do we begin to see others like they are made in the image of the creator of the heavens and earth, right? So when it comes to our individual lives, we need to start where Jesus started. And so it's summed up in one big word. It's love. Friends, Jesus tells us to love our neighbor. And these days, our neighbors can mean a lot of different things. It can mean our actual neighbor, maybe our next door neighbor, or it can mean our global neighbors, the people that we meet online that maybe are all the way across the world. We are so much more connected now in the world than we ever have been before, which makes seeing the image of God in others, no matter where they are in the world, easier to do, right? So that's the cool part about technology is we can connect and make deep, meaningful relationships with other people that we might not even have met in person because we connect with their soul. We connect with the things that they say and the likes, right? Not only is loving our neighbors something Jesus asks us to do, but it's something Jesus knew would not only be good for our neighbors, but be good for ourselves. Because friends, when we withhold love, or when we don't love others or acknowledge God's image in somebody else, we end up missing out on how big God truly is. It shrinks our view of God and limits our human experience. Because that's God in each and every single one of you. You have a piece of God in you that you can let shine. And here are a couple of ways that we could do this well. So one, we can get to know your close by neighbors. So what I mean by this is this could be your literal neighbors, maybe your desk neighbors in class, or even a school neighbor that you haven't talked too much. So somebody that you're in class with, or maybe you're in a sports team with, or a club with that you don't talk too much. First thing that would be good is to start with their names. Most important thing is to make sure you know somebody by their name, because when you know them by their name, you know something about them. Then strike up a conversation and get to know maybe their families or their interests or their life experiences. Maybe you could start praying for them by name. Praying to have a good relationship for them. Praying for them when they're going through something tough and they talk to you about it. Or even ask them good questions to learn more about their lives. See if they have any needs that need met. There's nothing better than to become friends with somebody and to help meet their needs. Be really brave and open yourself to having them meet your needs too. And then number 2, get to know your distant neighbors. So get to know their stories. Celebrate their culture. Seek to understand their values and what's important to them. Find ways to learn from them so that you can see how they uniquely reflect God's image. Just because they're not like us, just because they don't do the same things as us, or maybe dress the same as us, or maybe even talk the same as us, does not mean they're any less than. Then figure out the needs of your distant neighbors and find real tangible ways to meet them, friends. And there's the challenge. Think outside the box. Think more than just financially, because we all know that we don't have all of the money here. Maybe think socially as well as financially. Guys, even more, the group identity we are invited to as a church is more unique than anything else. Because from the very beginning, Jesus established the church to be the most diverse community of people coexisting together, surrounded by and held together by God's unconditional, never-ending love for us. Friends, when we work together as the church, we show the entire world how big God's love is for all of creation. And we get to participate in the work that Jesus started right here on earth and intended for us to continue doing, right? Because everyone is someone that is uniquely made by God, uniquely made in God's image. Think about your response to this question as you guys head to small groups. So who is someone you have a hard time getting along with? And then how can you begin to see God's image in them? So who is someone that you don't get along with or have a hard time getting along with? And how can you start seeing God's image and love in them?